Hello, students. You are welcome to session 5 of Unit 6. And in this session, we'll be looking at test construction. My name is Patrick Eji. By the end of this session, you should be able to mention different types of tests, explain different types of tests, explain different ways in which students' correction of tests is done. Now let's look at a test. So what is a test? And we must understand as teachers that test is an important component of teaching. And the outcome of test enables you, the teacher, to determine whether the students have achieved the objectives set for them. And it also enables the teacher to evaluate his teaching strategy so as to help him build upon his teaching skills. So you realize that test is a data collection tool that you use this to collect data, and this data will help you to assess or evaluate whether the set objectives that were stated for the lesson have been achieved, as well as to find out whether your teaching learning strategies were effective or not. So what are the types of tests? And there are different types of tests available to you as a teacher. And some of them are the true or false test, multiple choice test, completion and matching test, and the diagram or picture test. Now let's look at the true or false test. And in this type of test, statements are made and students are required to state whether they are true or false. And if the entire test is limited to true or false questions, then 75% or more of the items should help overcome the guessing factor. So if, as a teacher, you want to use true or false, then your students should not just guess and get an answer to the question that is being asked. So how do some teachers eliminate this? Some teachers eliminate this guessing problem by subtracting the number of wrong answers from the number of right answers to determine the score, so that to find out whether they are penalized for guessing. So you check the number of right answers and you find out that no, this question, if the student even decides to just go throughout, the student is going to score this marks. You realize that the student will not think about them well. So you must try as much as possible to eliminate this. So once you're able to eliminate guessing, the students who guess are being penalized for their guessing by way of the kind of questions that were given to them. And this procedure is not recommended because in science, students are expected to make hypotheses. That is, they are supposed to make good guesses. So in physics, hardly will you be seeing true or false questions. Not that they are not there, but they are not recommended. So the following are some suggestions to consider anytime you are conducting or you are constructing a true or false test. Avoid overbalancing the test with too many true or too many false questions. Try as much as possible to ensure even distribution of the questions. As much as possible, equal number of true and equal number of false, but they should be mixed up. And avoid using statements that might not trick students. Avoid using, so do not use the same language in the textbook. Once you do this, students will just memorize. And once they memorize, they see it, they're able to know whether it is true or false. Use simple sentences in your statement and try as much as possible to avoid qualitative statements. So for example, you are not supposed to write questions like some metals conduct electricity faster. So when you write this question, you realize that some metals, which of the metals do conduct electricity faster? So avoid such kind of questions in your true or false. Now let's look at multiple choice test. A multiple choice test consists of items having more than 3 responses. In a multiple choice test, only one answer is correct for each question. And so these are some suggestions to consider whenever you are constructing multiple choice test items. Make all responses plausible. All the responses should be appealing to the learner. They should all look like they are all answers that the learner can just select. And all responses should be grammatically consistent. Keep all responses about the same length. The next thing is randomize the correct responses so that there is no pattern in the examination. Because normally students look for patterns, so they will realize that, okay, there is this pattern, A, B, C, A, B, C, or you get A, B, B in that order. So you must randomize the responses. And also test for higher levels of understanding as much as possible. So an example of a multiple choice question is given below. A box which measures 6 centimeters by 4 centimeters by 2 centimeters has a mass of 192 grams. The density of the box is, so these are all plausible answers that whether the student performs the calculation using addition, he will get an answer, a division, he will get an answer here, subtraction, he will get an answer. So they are all plausible and the learner is likely to choose any of them. Now let's look at the completion and matching test. The completion and matching test consists of statements or comments whose meanings or synonyms can be found from among a group of words or statements. Completion and matching tests usually emphasize recall and are often verbally tricky. Therefore, its use should be minimized. So these are some suggestions that you can consider anytime you are using or you are constructing this type of test items. Number your questions and use letters for your answers or the reverse, but be consistent. Provide more matching choices than questions to minimize obtaining answers by elimination. So let's take an example. So under section A, we have questions and B are answers. And you realize that we have less questions than answers provided. So once you try elimination, it is not going to work here. Now let's look at the diagrams or picture test. And this type of test consists of using diagrams or pictures and then asking students to write or mention names of some parts of the picture as the teacher points to those parts. And this type of test is particularly useful in science, but it is less used in the Ghanaian context. And normally, we know that students understand most of the principles they are taught, but due to their verbal difficulties, such as reading and interpreting an information they have read, they do poorly when you give them a multiple choice test or a true or false. And so, once you use this form of test, it is able to help them perform. So studies have also indicated that many students do significantly better on tests that consist mainly of pictures and require them to check the correct responses. And this type of test is also useful for the mentally retarded students. So take note of this type. Although it is less used in Ghana, you can practice it in your classroom. So let's look at correction of student tests. And there are several ways of correcting student tests. So a student can help the teacher by using a marking scheme or key that has been prepared by the teacher. And here, the teacher distributes the test paper at random. And the student reads the answers to the class while the class corrects and finally computes the scores. And this method can be used for any of the tests described above and are suitable at all levels of education. So another way is that the student may be given a key or answers after they have taken the test. They then correct their own test. Or we can even ask them to write wrong answers at the back of the test paper or on a separate paper with an explanation for their incorrect responses. So the explanations that they will write at the back of the test paper will help the teacher to analyze, to determine which questions to be modified in future testing. Now, students, in this session, we look at different ways in which student correction of tests is done. We look at the various forms of test, multiple choice, true or false, the diagram type, and we saw that the diagram or the picture type is less used in the Ghanaian context. Now, as we bring the session to an end, let us take this question. Why is test an important component of teaching? If entire test is limited to true or false questions, how can we remove or minimize guessing?